It's always a little bit embarrassing to think of your strength sometimes, or you don't want to be too boastful. But sometimes it's great to quadruple down on strengths and congratulate yourself. To be successful in anything, you have to put effort in. But that doesn't mean that you can't balance looking after yourself, having good quality relationships. The road is really long.
I prefer to use the term compassion fatigue, that you're just tired, because you can recover from being tired. Burnout is sort of, that's it. Be open about how you are, how you're coping or not.
And we're lovely to see you again.
Same here. Nice. I like the painting behind.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. It's I was in New York with my wife a while ago, and there was this a father and son selling art, and he painted. He's a great artist, and he painted it with his son. So anyway, it's a nice story. So we bought the canvas.
I like it.
Yeah, it's really good. How have you been? Where are you in the world right now?
I'm back in Bexhill. I got back Thursday morning last week.
Okay, fine.
Enjoying the sea and everything. Yeah.
Lovely. Well, good to chat. We had a nice conversation, and really interested to chat to you about self-care, well-being, your new book, all of those things. Maybe to start, would you mind introducing yourself and just giving people a little bit of context? I know you've written, I think, is it 12 books now? Also?
More or less, a little bit, yes. So, okay, so I'm Anna, and by training, I'm a clinical psychologist, but I've done many things. I've worked as a clinical psychologist. I've worked in peacekeeping in the UN system, supporting staff in different types of missions, from conflict zones to family duty stations. And I have also been involved in leadership development and coaching, and I've written some books on leadership, mainly around the issue of helping people think about their positives and their negatives and how to tackle them, either as individual leaders or as organizations. So that's sort of what my focus is, in sort of trying to get people to look at both the positives and the negatives, because in my experience in different organizations, when we ignore the negatives is when things don't work out.
Yeah, interesting. You typically find that in corporate UK, America, whatever, that the negatives are, a lot of people focus on. I find focus on negatives sometimes more than the positives, or people think about the negatives more.
Yes.
Do you find the same?
I do, and it is. I think it's, there's some old research that I think exemplifies this, which is if you ask people to talk about positives themselves, their positives, they struggle, and similarly in organizations, but they'll reel off the negatives. But there's a converse to that, which is, although we do that more easily, we don't actually then tackle the negatives that we have in organizations and in ourselves. That we're reluctant to do.
True. It's always a little bit embarrassing to think of your strengths, isn't it? Sometimes, or you don't want to be too, boastful or whatever it is. But sometimes I think it's great to quadruple down on strengths and congratulate yourself.
Yes.
Feel good at something.
Yes. Because that is what will help you address the negatives,
Yeah.
And
that's true. Love that.
Please.
No, sorry. I was interrupting your thought.
No, I think it's what will help you address the negatives, and there's actually also a link between the negatives and the positives. They're not sort of two separate things. One, it can be a mirror image of the other, and it's just about building from that base, because we are all a base of positives and negatives, and just finding a better balance is part of the focus of what we should be doing, either individually or organizationally.
It's true. So your latest book is on self-care.
Yes.
What kind of prompted you to write the book at this time? And then I'd love to delve into some of the topics.
Okay. I've always been interested in leadership, both when I was working in organizations and since I've partially retired. And I realized a little late that a lot of the books on leadership are about how to become a better leader, how to adopt this particular style, say compassionate leadership or servant leadership. And I think partly because I'm a clinical psychologist and I was working with Grazia, who was the co-author, and we realized that there is some material around on self-care. And it's something that I used to do when I was in the UN system. We used to have sessions on self-care for leaders and things, but I didn't see that there was something that allowed a leader, a book that allowed a leader to look at their leadership, look at how they're looking after themselves, both at the low level of behavior or slightly deeper, and also similarly for their team. So that's what prompted us to write the book, to help
Interesting.
people.
And I think obviously your experience with the UN and all of that, it's quite extreme leadership, right?
Yes,
Extreme scenarios and
yes,
yeah, I mean, have you found, because people tend to make parallels a lot between army, war, and leadership and running teams. Also, sport as well is a very classic
yes,
analogy. Have you
yes.
found it to be the case that the lessons that you've learned or seen through your work in the UN relates well to leadership in a corporate scenario, company
They,
scenario?
yes, they do, Lewis. But there's one difference, and I was actually talking to some people yesterday, which is the big difference in the UN system. I mean, they still grapple with the same issues of leadership as people do in the corporate world. But I think the big difference is that you are expected to talk about values. It's part of why you are there in the UN system, is to uphold values, to the UN charter or the charter of the agency. So it's more sort of like that's what you do alongside leading. Whereas I think in the corporate sector, it's more assumed and perhaps in the background. Although now people are talking more about purpose, but I think
Oh, I see.
yeah,
Yeah, no, it's interesting. There's also this other kind of, I think, a little bit related, and I've done people have been talking about it recently. It's like, is a company a family, or is it a team?
yes,
And it's very topical right now. I'm seeing a lot of people talking about it because you come in and it's like, hey, we're a family here. Come join the family, and I'm
yes,
there for you and
yes,
stuff.
yes,
And until I have to make redundancies, and then see you later and go join another family. Or
yes,
or is it a team where you come in, it's high performing, we all going towards the same goal, but there's also this kind of thing where I realize that I will be cut if times get difficult, or I'm underperforming and things like that. And so I find that, I mean, related but very, very interesting, because you look at talking about the UN, or you look at army, and there's a lot of content from people that have led in the army, and they always talk about high performing teams, but also they speak about it like a family as well.
yes,
I think going through what is, I guess, a very extreme shared experience, which
yes,
probably brings them quite close.
yeah. No, it is. I mean, family is being, the concept of family is filtering in to leadership, and that's good. But and in the UN, actually, the UN family is a term you use
Oh,
to
right.
dis-
Okay.
it is a term you use to describe all the different agencies and parts of the UN. It's known as the UN family, and you will talk about the UN family. But I think. Um, you still, even though you talk about the UN family, you still get the competitiveness between agencies and programs and things like this, and people understanding or not understanding the different elements of each other. I think the UN and the humanitarian sector, the assumption is people will be more collegiate, and they generally are more collegiate. But that doesn't mean that you're not going to get competition, that you're not going to get the negativity. I think the
Yeah.
difference between the humanitarian sector, the corporate sector, and perhaps the armed forces is the only organization or body where the signs of leadership are very obvious. From first post to last post, you're reminded of why you are in the army. from the uniform, you are reminded why you are. Whereas in a corporate set, even in the UN setting or in a corporate setting, those signs are not so clear, except
Yeah.
for the labels on people's doors.
Yeah. Or their Google Meet or Teams
Yes.
Teams thing now.
Yes.
That's interesting. Moving on to self-care, just
Yes.
I guess from your experience and so forth, are there certain things that a leader can do to look after themselves better? And maybe just give some context that, if you look over the last 4 or 5 years with COVID, a lot of people, and let's say leaders who are also human, went through difficult times, difficult moments, and privately a lot shared that they were burnt out, stressed, tired, things like that. And it's always quite difficult as a leader because it's like, who does the go-to person go to when
Yes.
they're struggling? Because the caricature is almost, I'm the leader and I need to be strong and I can't show any cracks, and God
Yeah.
forbid I share with my team that I'm
Yes.
struggling with my mental health or well-being or anything like that. Um, what have you seen, and is there any advice that you could give for people that are going through something like that?
I, I think what I've seen is, to be honest, there are very few leaders that I've worked with or know of that actually are good at looking after themselves. They are in the minority. Um, what I have seen, I think that a simple first step is, as Greg says in the book, take time out. Take half an hour just for yourself, and go and have that lunch, or just go for that walk. And that's the first step and first sign. I think one of the things when I was within the UN system, one of the things we did for leaders in some of the regions that the team was covering is we had closed meetings, closed staff counseling, staff welfare meetings for leaders, just to talk in private with other leaders about how difficult this was and how they were looking after themselves. Because I think when you're a leader, you have a particular persona, and some people don't feel that persona doesn't include divulging how they're feeling, although it doesn't hurt to talk about it. But I think just make some time for yourself, make some private time, and let that build. And I think then go to creating your own self-care plan and following it. But
Yeah.
not a self-care plan that means you're going to be a superhuman. It's just about the human side of you.
So what's a self-care plan? Like, how would you go
It's
about
one.
doing that?
Okay, the first thing is, I think, to look at um, what balance you have between your work and your home life. To look at the quality of the relationships you have. Not that you have to have millions, or you have, and it's more than your Instagram following. It's just,
Yeah.
who do you have in your life, and how helpful are they to how you want to be and how you're living your life? And then go to things like healthy living, like how you're eating, what you're consuming as liquids, how you're maintaining your mental health, how you're maintaining your physical health, where you're living, how helpful is that? And those things. And that's you if you're going to look at all of those areas, you have to make time for that. But if you just simply start with, am I sleeping well? Am I eating well? That's enough.
Yeah. No, I love that. I love that. So, good sleep, eat well, and exercise.
Yes.
Right, 3
Yes.
cornerstones. I think what I tend to see is a lot of people, they work hard at
Yes.
work, but they don't work hard at self-care or
Yes.
relaxing, because I think you have to work hard at both.
Yes. Yes. And I saw some research last week. I think it was by Slack, and the research showed that people who take breaks at work, and that's the simplest level of intervention, they're actually 13% more productive.
There we go. Yeah, because there's this misnomer of, like, because working, because it's a mixture, right? I mean, I think I'm a big proponent is to get to be successful in anything, you have to put effort in, right? Like, you have to work hard at stuff.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, but that doesn't mean that you can't balance, looking after yourself, having good quality relationships with friends, family, staying healthy. Because it's the road is really long,
Yes.
right? Like we're going to be working for an awful long time.
Yes.
In the UK, there is no retirement age. Many people can't afford to retire,
Yes.
and so you have to stay in the game,
Yes.
which means looking after yourself.
Yeah.
Um,
Sure.
I'm a big proponent of that. One thing I do is diarize my exercise.
There you
Like it's the
go.
most important meeting of the day. And it's my time, right? It's like an
Yes.
hour. I go to the gym, I do my weightlifting, I run, I walk, whatever your thing is.
Yes.
You just feel incredible afterwards.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. And make time for fun also, I think,
Yes, this is true. Which means you have to spend time with people, like friends outside of work.
Yeah.
You become friends with someone if you spend time with them and maintain that friendship by spending time with them. You're right. It's not just liking their thing on Instagram.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, how you doing? Fancy a drink? Catching up.
Yes.
I had it actually. I met some friends. I try and make time for my friends as much as I can, but they've been friends from university, like 25 years. There's something incredible about sitting down with someone that's known you for a long time and just it's different, right? It's like you're doing all
Yes.
this stuff and maybe you're doing well in life and no. So when you come to see someone that's known you for a long time, it cut through all of that rubbish,
Yeah.
you know, and it's a really good energizing thing to do, I think. So
For sure. For sure.
love that. Um, Burnout
Yes.
is another thing I wanted to get your thoughts on.
Sure.
It's something that is being talked about more often.
Yeah.
A lot more. I mean, the last 4 or 5 years, and this is linked to self-care, of course. But again, with leaders, never been a thing to put your hand up and say I'm burning out.
Yeah.
Team members as well. I think just generally in the workforce, I saw, and maybe this isn't not universal, but just generally, it wasn't something that people wanted to put their hands up about. And certainly when you're in a situation of your firm making redundancy, you just don't want to be the next one out. And so you think you're less likely to just say, hey, I'm struggling and stuff like that. So my question is, as a leader, how
Mm.
can you recognize if you are burning out? And
Okay.
then also, how can I recognize if my team are also struggling?
Okay. Um, there are some very clear signs that you can look out for. One is that you care less. You're not bothered so much. Your emotions may be all over the place, or you become really distant, or you become very angry. There are signs. And there's a classic set of signs that you can look at, and you can recognize which ones apply to you. I tend not to use the term burnout because there's something finite about that term. I prefer to use the term compassion fatigue, that you're just tired, because you can recover from being tired. Burnout is sort of, that's it.
Grips
So,
it. Yeah. Yeah.
and I think you can. There are some people I've worked with where they recognize that that's the point they get to in their work life, and so they build in fail-safe mechanisms. So one very senior person I worked at, he had a probably one of the most stressful jobs you can have. And what he used to do was every 2 years, he'd have 12 weeks where he'd go offline. You could not get hold of him. He
Wow.
just would go offline for 3 months. And then he'd come back refreshed. Because
Amazing.
that's the best thing, is to just take that time out, or to recognize when you're getting a little bit tired. I've recently done some work which I was glad I was contributing to, but it was very stressful work, and I recognized the signs of compassion fatigue in myself, whereas I was getting a little bit tetchy. And one of the things I do when I'm getting stressed is I double check and triple check the doors before I leave the house. So when I got up to 4 checks, I thought, "You need to stop. You need to take some time out." So you just once you recognize it, you can do. And similarly with the team, I think it's just giving that, be open about how you are, how you're
Yeah.
coping or not, and give them the permission to at least speak about it. And what you can do, which is what we did with the team in COVID, was as they came on board, each person was asked to create their own self-care plan and also a team care plan. And the team manager would make sure the team was following the behaviors that they said they would use collectively to look after themselves. The individual self-care plan was different, which is we asked, as managers and leaders, we asked the team to create their own self-care plan, but I didn't want to know the details of it. That was private.
Right.
All I would say is, please, are you sure please follow the plan. If you need any help, just ask. And we left it like that. And that seemed to work.
Love the idea of a self-care plan. I also love the idea of suggesting to your team that they should create a self-care plan. I'm going to do that. I think it's a really nice thing to do.
Thank you.
No, it's great. It's great because I think a lot of the time, and this is something I want to get thoughts as well. It's like, people talk about bringing their whole selves to work, authentic selves to work, or some of their selves to work. And everyone's a bit different, right? Like as a leader, sometimes it's difficult to know how much to lean in or not. And there's something that, like self-care, sometimes can be quite personal to people.
Yes. I think it becomes, I think you also have to get a sense of what's okay to talk about and what's not okay to talk about, because I think the person who overshares, I think, just really messes the whole thing up, because you really usually if people are oversharing is that they're at the end of their tether and they're just they're sharing too much. So it's not good for them and it's not good for those around them. So you bring yourself to work, and if you feel authentic, then do so. And but sometimes we move into an act. But if you keep yourself centered on who you are, that does work. But I think you have to be. I think if we actually literally brought our whole selves to work, I'm not sure how many of us would survive in work.
No, I mean the world's very polarized. It's interesting, you have there's 60 country elections this year on the planet.
Yes. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, says The Economist. I was reading and did an article in January, I think they did. So I mean, we're halfway through now, obviously.
Yeah.
UK is next month. The US is soon. There's a lot. India's just been. So you can imagine in a work scenario, if people are discussing those things, I mean, it's crazy
Yeah.
stuff.
Yes.
What's your view on? I just wanted to. We talked about this a little bit last time we spoke around social media and its impact on people's mental health
Yeah.
and well-being. What are your thoughts on it? I mean, I'm seeing a lot of there's a lot of negativity on there for sure, and I do find people sometimes get caught in a whole, let's say, rabbit hole perhaps of just almost this negativity, and if they do that in the first thing in the morning, that just affects their whole day.
Yes.
I love your colleague unplugging for 3 months. I don't think I could unplug for more than a day before getting itchy. That's probably really, really bad. But I think social media is definitely something that you can monitor yourself, and a
Yes.
lot of people are talking about spending less time on it. What are your thoughts on it and its impact?
I mean, it's not going to go away. It has a place. But I think you have to be, especially around mental health and well-being, you have to be very careful about what you're listening to and how much attention you're paying to that. And the first thing is to make sure that whatever you're listening to is valid, comes from someone who is trained, knows what they're talking about, because well-being is not a regulated field, and nor is mental health. And so you'll get people, even people who are professionally trained, may say something because that's their preference. So you really need to make sure that what you're paying attention to, what is valid, what is reliable, because people do that. Now, when I work as a clinical psychologist and I'm doing therapy with people, they will say, have you heard this? What do you think of this thing? And so I'll say, yes, I have, or no, I will need to check it. And the same with coaching and the same with leaders, but you have to be really careful. And also manage just in terms of the time you spend on it. You have to give it the place it is, which is really, it's a library. And we you know, when we just had libraries, we never spent whole days in libraries. But you know, when I go out and about, I will see someone, or I'm on the bus or the train, I will see people really hooked into their thing. So I think you have give it a place, but not one that takes over your life,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
to put some boundaries in, because otherwise, it just I think that affects you negatively, especially if you're listening to the wrong piece of advice.
True. No, 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 true. There's some amazing content around it, with some wonderful people producing it. But
Yes,
absolutely, everyone is a well-being, or like there's always some. You just don't know who's creating the content. You don't know what their context is,
yeah,
um, and no, and it's important. So you should definitely check your sources, and also read widely, or watch widely, listen
yeah,
widely. I think the podcasts are great.
yes,
You can really decide who to listen to and make sure that they're good. I think the issue now we've got, which is really interesting with AI and everything, is that when I think in the past you believe what you see. So you
okay,
watch the news, you watch a video, generally it's a real person having a video and talking. And now with AI and what it can do, you're not sure. It can create video, it can create audio. And I think for one of the first times, and I've been thinking about this, recently, it's you can't actually always believe what you see now
yes,
online.
yes,
So be careful with the content that you
yes,
consume, and make sure you fact check and all of that stuff. Because again, people are consuming bite size mostly. I'm a real big fan of long form content like this, where we're talking for a while,
yeah,
we're going in depth. It's
yeah,
not just sound bites,
yeah.
and I think it's a good way to do it. But yeah, be careful.
Very for sure, for sure. But as you get, I think as we get used to AI, I think we're going to spot what's real, what's authentic, and what's not. Um, because I've had to pay attention.
Hopefully.
It's coming into a lot of the different things I've been doing the last
Right.
6 months, and you learn
In what
whether this
way? How's it?
it's sort of things like when the answer's too automatic and too quick, and not there isn't that space that you have when somebody's thinking about it, or if someone does something that's a little too fast. For example, I was a coach on an assessment center, and there was a written exercise. Participants had 20 minutes to read an email and then draft a response. And generally people, and they also had to look at some statistics in that 20 minutes. And most people would produce 2 paragraphs, but some produced 3 pages. So you just knew that that wasn't possible. You know?
Brilliant. Brilliant. Yeah, sometimes you can tell.
Yes, not always, but sometimes.
Not all. Yeah, yeah. No, no, I really like that. So no, I think it's good. I think for me, it's part of my self-care program, which I'm about to write for myself, around what I consume, who I surround myself with. I do think about a lot, and it was to your earlier point, because you talked a bit about getting groups of leaders together in a closed room. I think for those that are leading companies that are smaller, and you don't have the benefit of other leaders or people at your level, you have to look externally and create
Yes,
your own circle
yes,
of trust, or I
yes,
sometimes
yes,
call it a personal
yes,
board of directors and things like that.
yes.
um, is something important to do. There's a lot of people around in a similar situation to you that are
Yeah,
crying out for a
yes,
conversation, I think.
yes. And if it's a group, you can also what I sometimes do if it's senior people or just anybody with some, if it's sort of like a program to help people think about their self-care, the leadership. Some of the exercises, these are private exercises. I don't want anything coming back into the main group unless you want to share. And if you keep that private part of themselves, it helps people be in a group sometimes.
Yeah, yeah. No, I love that. How would you encourage people so that are resistant to self-care? And there are a lot, because I do see a lot of people where they don't feel they have a problem. Well,
Yes.
it's probably maybe the wrong word, but they don't feel like they need to spend time looking after themselves or recharging. Constantly have to be reminded to take holidays. I think for me, a really good leader is someone that is encouraging their team and
Yes.
others to take breaks. How would you kind of approach that kind of situation?
Um, One of the things I was taught is if somebody's at the point of resistance, is never to suggest actions for them because they won't do it or they'll sabotage. So the work is really around helping them to realize and recognize where they are psychologically. And I think with a senior leader, I would just present some research and say, if this is, I say, please let me know a little bit about how you're living and how you're working. And I say, well, here's some evidence that says these are the risks involved in how you're functioning. Have a think about it and maybe sort of do a little bit of repetition because if somebody's resistant, the work is to help them open up and realize exactly what the effect is of how they're functioning and operating, rather than saying, why don't you try this? Because they won't. They'll find all the reasons under the sun not to do that action. So it's not acting, but getting them to really, even just one or two questions, getting them to stop and think about how they're
Yeah.
doing. I've done that in
Yeah.
coaching. I just give one question and say, please have a think and let's meet next week.
Yeah, I like that. Do you think remote work and working from home and things like that has had any effect on self-care and well-being?
On the surface, yes, I think it has. It's allowed people to blend all parts of their life more. But I think where it can backfire is where the organization wants people back in, and sort of cuts down on how much remote work is done, and that often is because that's what the organization is used to, or they have a physical space that needs to be used. But I think it does help with self-care as long as you, again, maintain boundaries, because when you're working and when you're home, especially if you have responsibilities towards others, because sometimes, especially parents with young kids, I can see, you know, it still is very complex for them. And the
Yeah.
person often sometimes forgets who they are. Um,
Yeah, no, that's true. It's interesting because obviously it's a huge thing now, and the conversation's been going on for a long time. You're right. There's many firms that are asking people to come back to an office, um, or quit and go find themselves another job. It's kind of that kind
yeah.
of thing now, and I think it's always difficult when something is changed on you. Like if you're in a firm and
Yes.
it's moved to work from anywhere, or whatever, work 4 days from home, whatever it is, and it's being changed on you emotionally. That's quite
Yeah.
a thing. When you're
Yes.
choosing to go somewhere and it's 5 days in the office, fine. Because I think also the other thing is no one size fits all, is there? And I think some people love the flexibility and love working from home, and they're much better off for it mentally, physically, and stuff. But then there's also a lot of folks that I speak with where they're craving the human contact. They're missing the learning. The boss doesn't
Yes.
go into the office, so there's
Yeah.
no point for them going in.
Yeah.
Um, and actually, they're working. They don't go out. Like they're at home like all the
Yes.
time,
Yeah.
out of bed, straight at the desk, and forget to. So I think it's a really just interesting. It ebbs and flows, and I think your self care plan for me is a great way, whatever scenario you're in,
Yeah.
because it'd be a really nice guide to
Yes.
manage yourself.
Yes, and it'll help deal with the loneliness, which can be detrimental to mental health. It's some people do like being lonely. If you have autistic qualities, you can prefer being alone. But you can even if you have autistic qualities, you can factor in some social stuff that will honor your autism and your autistic qualities, but also allow you to handle the loneliness.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. Anna, thank you so much. That's a good, really good discussion. I know your book's on Amazon, so for anyone that wants to grab your book, um, Amazon's probably a good place to do it. And I really appreciate all your insights and thoughts. Really very interesting.
Thank you.